The sun beat down on the dusty main street of Dry Creek, Arizona, 1870, turning the sand into a shimmering haze. A throng of townsfolk, saloon keepers, blacksmiths, children with wide eyes, packed the road from the wooden storefronts to the old water trough. In the center, a wooden punishment rail stood like a cruel monument. Miriam, a young woman with trembling hands, was shoved against it, her voice cracking as she begged for mercy. No one answered. Behind her, Marshal Elias Crow gripped her shoulders, his jaw set like stone. He could feel the weight of the law pressing down, but his conscience screamed against the injustice. The crowd muttered, some calling her a liar, others spitting on the dusty ground. Their eyes glittered with a hunger for spectacle, not compassion. A distant rumble of hooves cut through the murmurs. A rider appeared on the ridge, his silhouette growing larger with each heartbeat. The townspeople fell silent, the tension thick enough to choke. The rider's hat was tipped low, his face hidden by a weather-worn scarf. He was Miriam's father, Samuel Harper, returning from the far-off ranch with a decision that could change everything. If you're hooked by this showdown, smash that like button, share this story, and subscribe for more. Drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? The horse slowed, the rider dismounted, and the crowd leaned in, waiting for the words that would either save or shatter Miriam's fate. What would Samuel say as he stepped onto the rail? Inside the cramped back room of the marshal's office, the air was heavy with the scent of oil lamps and stale sweat. Miriam sat on a splintered bench, her eyes red from tears, clutching a cracked tin cup. Elias placed a fresh jug of water beside her, his hands trembling ever so slightly. "Why are they doing this to you?" he asked in a low voice, careful not to let the door's thin walls betray their conversation. Miriam's voice was barely a whisper. "They say I stole a piece of land, that I owe the banker for a debt I never took. They want me to be an example." She glanced at the rusted rail through the cracked window, the crowd's murmurs faintly audible. Elias leaned in, his eyes narrowing. "The banker, Caldwell, has been squeezing the town for years. He owns the water rights, the mines, even the school's roof tiles. He's been forging contracts, making families sign away what's theirs." Miriam's breath caught. "My father, Samuel, he's been fighting him for years. He left to get help, but I heard he's coming back today." A sudden clatter echoed from the hallway. A booted foot slammed against the wooden floor. The marshal's eyes flicked to the door. "He's on his way," Elias muttered, "and the council wants this punishment finished before he arrives." The door creaked open just enough for a sliver of light, and a shadow fell across the room. Who was waiting on the other side? Morning painted the sky a bruised orange as the townsfolk gathered again, this time in a tighter circle around the rail. The air buzzed with nervous whispers, the scent of fresh coffee mingling with dust. Samuel Harper rode in, his horse's hooves striking the wooden planks with a steady rhythm that seemed to echo the town's heartbeat. He dismounted without a word, his eyes scanning the crowd before locking onto his daughter's trembling form. The silence was deafening. "Father," Miriam whispered, her voice shaking. Samuel raised a hand, not in anger, but in exhaustion. "I've heard the truth, Miriam. Caldwell's contracts are lies. I came to free you, but the council has a different plan." He glanced at the marshal, then at the councilman huddled near the bank. "I must choose, my family's survival or the town's future." Elias felt a cold knot in his stomach. He knew the council's grip on the town was ironclad, but Samuel's words hinted at a hidden agenda. Enjoying the tension? Like, share, and subscribe, and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Samuel's gaze drifted toward the distant ridge, where a faint plume of smoke rose, signs of a possible ally or an approaching danger. What secret plan was Samuel about to unveil? Back in the marshal's office, Elias spread a stack of yellowed papers across the table. The documents were Caldwell's forged contracts, each one bearing a false signature and altered land boundaries. He pointed to a clause that gave the banker exclusive rights to the town's water source. "This is the proof we need," Elias said, his voice steady. "If we present this to the council, they'll have no choice but to halt the punishment." Miriam's eyes widened. "Will they listen? They've been bought for years." Elias nodded. "We'll need a voice the council can't ignore. Your father's." He turned to the window, watching Samuel's silhouette fade into the street. If Samuel steps forward now, the town may finally see the truth. A sudden knock rattled the door. A young woman in a modest dress entered, clutching a leather satchel. "I'm Lila, a traveling lawyer. I've heard about Caldwell's deeds. I have witnesses willing to testify." Elias felt a surge of hope. "Then we must act fast. The council will convene in an hour." Lila opened her satchel, revealing a sealed envelope stamped with the town's seal. Inside lay a list of names, farmers, merchants, who had been forced to sign under duress. Who would be brave enough to stand up now? The town square filled with murmuring voices as the council took their seats beneath the wooden gazebo. The air crackled with anticipation. Samuel stepped forward, his shoulders heavy, his eyes fixed on the rail where his daughter stood. Elias stood beside Miriam, the forged contracts clutched in his hand. Lila took a deep breath, ready to speak. "Councilmen," Lila began, her voice echoing, "these documents prove Caldwell's fraud. The land you've been forced to surrender is not theirs." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Caldwell, a stout man with a cold stare, rose, his hand gripping the grip of his pistol. "You dare accuse me before the law?" he snarled, his tone threatening but not overtly violent. Samuel's jaw tightened. "I fought Caldwell for years. I won't let my daughter die for his greed." The council leader, a wiry man named Reed, stared at the papers, then at the faces before him. "We will deliberate," he announced, "but the punishment must proceed until a decision is reached. Before we move on, take a break with me, Joe. Pour yourself a warm cup of tea, settle in, and tell me what time it is, where you are listening from, and if you are enjoying this story so far. Consider subscribing. It helps more than you know." The crowd's tension rose as Caldwell's pistol glinted in the sun, the barrel pointing toward the rail. Will the marshal be able to stop the gun before it fires? Elias stepped forward, his badge catching the light. "Hold your fire, Caldwell," he commanded, his voice firm. "We have proof of your crimes. The law must protect the innocent." Caldwell's hand trembled, the pistol's weight evident. "You think you can outsmart me?" he hissed. Samuel lunged, grabbing the barrel with both hands, his muscles straining. "I won't let you kill my child for paper," he shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. Miriam's eyes widened, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Father, no!" Lila, clutching the satchel, whispered to Elias. "If we can get the council to see the evidence now, we might convince Caldwell to lower his weapon." The crowd held its breath, the silence broken only by the creak of the wooden rail. The sun beat down, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward the impending climax. Elias reached for the pistol, his fingers brushing the cold metal. In that instant, a distant whistle sounded, an approaching stagecoach, its wheels kicking up dust. Who was coming on that stagecoach, and what would they bring? The stagecoach screeched to a halt, its driver shouting, "Hold, sheriff's men." A tall figure stepped down, his coat dusted with sand. It was Deputy Cole, a trusted friend of Elias, who had been away on a posse. Cole's eyes scanned the scene, landing on the pistol, then on the documents in Elias's hand. "What's the trouble here?" he asked, his tone calm but authoritative. Elias quickly explained the situation, handing the forged contracts to Cole. The deputy read them, his brow furrowing. "Caldwell's grip is tighter than we thought," he muttered, "but I've got something that might tip the scales." From his coat, Cole produced a sealed envelope bearing the governor's seal. "The governor sent a warrant for Caldwell's arrest. He's been investigated for fraud across the territory." The crowd gasped, the tension breaking like a dam. Caldwell's eyes darted, panic flickering across his face. You can't," he stammered. Samuel, still gripping the pistol, felt a surge of hope. "Father, we have the law on our side now." Caldwell's hand shook, the pistol wobbling. The governor's warrant lay on the rail, a silent promise of justice. Will Caldwell surrender, or will he make a final, desperate move? The governor's deputy, a stern woman named Marshal Hawkins, stepped forward, the warrant clutched in her gloved hand. "Caldwell, you are under arrest for fraud and extortion. You will be taken to the territorial court." Caldwell's face hardened, but the weight of the law was undeniable. He lowered the pistol, the metal clinking against the wooden rail. "You think this ends my hold on the town?" he snarled, his voice low. Marshal Hawkins placed a hand on his shoulder. "Your hold ends today. The council will be dissolved, and the land will be returned to its rightful owners." Samuel exhaled, his shoulders relaxing for the first time in weeks. "Miriam, you're free." Miriam's eyes filled with a mixture of relief and lingering fear. "Father, thank you." Elias stepped back, the crowd erupting in cheers. The townsfolk began to gather the documents, ready to restore the rightful deeds. "If you're thrilled by the turn of events, like—" As the sun climbed higher, a distant rumble echoed, an ominous thunderstorm rolling over the horizon, dark clouds gathering over the town. What new danger could the storm bring to Dry Creek? Rain began to fall in sheets, drenching the streets and turning the dust into mud. The townspeople hurried to secure their belongings, but a sudden shout cut through the downpour. "Caldwell's men! They're back!" A group of rough-looking men, armed with rifles, emerged from the shadows of the saloon, their faces hidden beneath wide hats. They moved toward the rail, intent on reclaiming the power they thought lost. Samuel drew his revolver, his hand steady despite the rain. "We won't let you take her again," he declared, his voice booming over the storm. Elias raised his badge, shouting, "Stand down! The law is on our side." The leader of the men, a scarred man named Briggs, sneered. "The law can't protect you when the town's money is on the line." He gestured to a sack of gold coins tied to his horse. "We'll take what's ours, one way or another." Miriam clutched the forged contracts, her resolve hardening. "You'll never own what's rightfully ours." A bolt of lightning illuminated the street, and in that flash, a figure slipped from the crowd, a lone rider on a black horse, his face hidden beneath a dark veil. He raised a hand, pointing toward the men. Who was this mysterious rider, and what would he do? The mysterious rider spurred his horse forward, the hooves pounding the wet ground. He dismounted, revealing a weathered face marked by years of hardship, an old friend of Samuel's, a former sheriff named Jonah, who had vanished years ago after a failed rebellion. Jonah shouted, "Caldwell's men, you're under arrest. The governor's warrant still stands." He produced a second sealed document, an order for the immediate seizure of Caldwell's assets, signed by the territorial governor himself. The men hesitated, the rain mixing with sweat on their brows. Briggs barked an order, but his voice faltered as Jonah's men, hidden in the shadows, emerged with rifles trained on the intruders. A tense standoff unfolded, the storm's roar masking the crack of gunfire that never came. The townsfolk, emboldened by the new evidence, began to chant for justice, their voices rising above the thunder. Samuel lowered his revolver, his eyes meeting Miriam's. "We fought for this long," he whispered, "and now we finally have a chance." Elias stepped forward, his badge glinting in the lightning, and placed his hand on the rail, symbolically breaking the chain that had bound Miriam. If you've enjoyed this wild ride, like, share, and subscribe. Drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? As the rain finally eased, the crowd began to disperse, the town's future finally feeling hopeful. Yet, as Miriam turned to walk away, a lone figure lingered in the doorway of the old saloon, watching her with eyes that seemed to hold a secret. What hidden truth would that figure reveal next? The rain-slicked street glistened as the last of the crowd drifted away, their boots thudding against the packed earth. Miriam's silhouette vanished toward the horizon, the dust of Dry Creek kicking up behind her like a fading memory. The townsfolk whispered among themselves, eyes flickering toward the old saloon, where a lone figure still lingered in the doorway, his coat dusted with mud and his hat pulled low over a weather-worn face. Elias stepped forward, his badge now a dull copper relic in the waning light. "Who are you?" he asked, voice low enough that only the stranger could hear. The man lifted his head, revealing a scar that ran from cheek to jaw, a mark earned in a gunfight long ago, when the town was still young and the law was a promise, not a paper. "I'm the son of the banker you all fear," the stranger said, his tone steady. "My name is Silas Caldwell. I rode in after hearing the commotion, hoping to claim what's mine. What I found instead was a town on the brink of breaking, and a daughter who refused to be broken." He slipped a folded parchment from his coat and placed it on the rail where Miriam had once stood. "These are the original deeds, signed before my father ever set foot in Dry Creek. He forged the rest, selling the land to the council for his own gain. I kept the true copies hidden, waiting for the day someone would have the courage to read them." Elias unfolded the paper, his eyes widening as the ink revealed the rightful owners: Miriam's family, the Harper homestead, and dozens of other families whose claims had been erased. A murmur rose from the few remaining townspeople, hope sparking like a match in dry tinder. Silas turned to the marshal, his voice softer now. "I came to take what's mine, but I see now that justice belongs to the people, not to a name. I'll hand these documents to the territorial court, and I'll stay to help rebuild if you'll have me." Elias nodded, the weight of his badge feeling lighter than ever. "You've given us a chance to right a wrong. Let's make sure no one else ever has to stand on that rail again." Miriam